November 16th agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second. Oh, I didn't know that's the last weekend.
No, you can't.
Oh, yeah, I can't. Yeah.
So
That's
the three acting trustees are
fine.
Maho and Charles. And
Yeah. I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Great. All right, and let's have a motion to approve the October meeting minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Should we jump into new business?
Let's do. Maho, can you hear me okay if I speak at this volume? Okay, very good. So I'll get right to it with the updates. We have a fewer categories this time. One of the items that we typically talk about, the facility updates, I believe the board expects to take up in executive session tonight, so we won't preview that. Our enrollment is up from monthly update to monthly update. We're up 4 students, so we're now at 96% enrollment, which is a little bit helpful fiscally. I do think that next month we should have a conversation about our backfill enrollment policy, and the finance committee suggests, I think Alejandro, your committee suggests that we would consider backfilling longer during the school year. It's a conversation we'll have with our academic staff as well, but that may prove to be financially prudent. That being said, in the climate of this year, with many schools down, our team's been working really hard, and so we appreciate that.
What is the exact number now?
We are at 317 right now, 316 in New York City DOE billables, plus 1 from another school district in New York. So yeah, and that fluctuates a little day to day. We are currently enrolling in all grade levels, and so we love everyone's help.
I thought we were enrolling in third.
I'm sorry, that's correct. Okay. We are enrolling in all enrollable grade levels, K, 1, and 2, and then by policy, we don't enroll in third grade. Thank you. The heart of tonight's meeting is some academic updates, and we've had quite a month since we last met. The biggest news, of course, is that we've welcomed our new principal, Joanna Andujar, who's here with us tonight. You have known her as our vice principal, and she's known the principal job for many successful years with other charter school organizations. And so I'm going to ask her to say a few words tonight about what the last few weeks have been like. I want to also, in case you didn't catch it in the written updates, I want to also mention that we've also welcomed a new vice principal who is already in place, Ms. Graciela Walker, who's also a veteran vice principal, dean of culture, principal, teacher, and so forth, with a background in New York and New Jersey charter and district schools. Vice Principal Walker has already started taking the baton from Joanna in terms of making sure that our school-wide systems of support are all in place, working with our Director of Student Services, working with our social worker, helping behavior around the building, so that we don't lose a step as our principal focuses on that role. So we're very, very fortunate to be in that position, I believe. So I think we've got a few specifics we'd like to share, but do you want to start out with just any general thoughts about what it's been like?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like it's been 16 days. It feels like it's been 3 months. But we have definitely, I'm sure the board knows that we had given back a day in February to teachers to have an all-day PD on Veterans Day. So it was really great to have that day to reset and reset our school priorities. So we started off with that. So for culture, it's the implementation of responsive classroom with fidelity. instruction, implementation of research-based instructional practices that foster rigor, and for professional development, establishing a culture of learning and feedback. So we started off with that. And as we discussed in, we discussed a couple of times, especially in the education committee, about the concerns of the curriculum. So what we did was that we streamlined lesson planning. So we implemented a framework, and teachers not only received exemplar lessons and support with planning, but we also did some teach backs on Veterans Day, which was pretty new for a lot of teachers, but they were uncomfortable, comfortable being uncomfortable. So that was a hit. It was a very successful all-day PD.
And can you explain what a teach back is?
Yeah, so the teacher has the lesson, and they teach the lesson in, with the team or staff. And then the leaders give feedback, the teachers also give feedback, and then they do it again. So they're practicing their instruction, but we honed in the IU, right? That modeling and introducing the skill. We need to do the gradual release of the pieces of the feedback of the lesson framework. So right now it's really honing in on the planning and the practice. So that's a big deal. And we also rolled out the teaching and learning framework. And all teachers have self-evaluated themselves this week, and they're going to coaching meetings with their deans, and they're talking about what they've been working on, where they are, and setting goals based on our teacher evaluation tool. We also changed the master schedule. Shout out to Matthew for his support. We needed a lot of adjustments on our master schedule, so teachers are really happy with having transition time. Kids have more recess and lunchtime. So that's a big deal for staff. And the 90-day development plan. So we rolled this out along with the new framework for lesson planning to norm on instructional practices. So it's a three phases in 90 days. So there are all those instructional practices that we are expecting teachers to see in classrooms that will increase the rigor and making the most of STEP. This is our first round this year, so we started STEP assessments this week. We are norming and scoring on Wednesday, so all of the assessments that teachers have administered, they are not grading, so that we are sure that we're norming and that we're scoring accurately. So that's a little bit of what's happened in the last 16 days.
Yeah, it's hard to go through it all without losing your breath. It's been really inspiring to see our leadership team come together, both instructional and operational, working together. There's a lot to be done. I know Joanna would be the first to say that it's not like everything's all figured out. But if I could just chime in on the school-wide priorities, I think to put these in layman's terms, this is how I think about it. We've been using responsive classroom this year. Joanna's been a great champion for that inside of our building. Our challenge is to make sure that everyone is really following it to the point that we get all the benefits out of the positive culture, out of the consistent teacher talk, and that's working together with our school-wide support systems. So it's that fidelity, not just a practice from here and a practice from there, but doing everything from the morning meetings to all the other aspects of responsive classroom across our whole school. The piece about rigor here, we talked a little in the academic committee about how rigor can sometimes sound like just more homework or just teachers being mean. That isn't what it's about. It really is about making sure that lessons are designed so the kids are thinking, so that every student is thinking, and we're checking for everyone's understanding, and they're also adding even that metacognition of thinking about thinking and checking their own understanding of their progress. And so it was really great on Veterans Day to see Joanna, Raphael, all of our deans explaining these concepts and working with teachers on that. And then that also falls into this culture of learning and feedback. You guys read about this in our charter application. We've been aspiring and working towards it. I just think of it as we've picked up the speed. We were accelerating in this area and making sure that the norms about getting a lot of feedback and really understanding why that's our culture and why it's a good thing, that's really consistent across all the grade levels. So it's been it's been fun to watch, and we're looking forward to being able to share progress, right, as we go these upcoming months. So I wanted to, pause there and ask any questions or discussion. We did have one committee call about this, but I'm sure there are folks who weren't there who might like to talk it over a little bit.
The teachers are mean, right?
As mean as
We haven't given that up.
So Wednesday, how much time do you have on Wednesday?
From 2:30 to 4:30.
Okay. Great. And that's at LEEP, right?
My question, I think, is more about like, did this strike people as like an overall welcome change, or was there some resistance given that this, it's not hard, like, if you don't already have a mindset that leans towards one of feedback, that it can feel very tough to receive it, especially with a feedback being that like it's real time in public, and some people do not take well to those things. How did that go overall?
I definitely, some of this work was happening, but in pockets, in small pockets. And I think that we anticipated, right, the emotions and the change that staff would feel. So it definitely, Michael and myself, like very strategically thinking about like what's the language that we're using and progress monitoring and checking with teachers. But I strongly believe that a big percent of teachers were not surprised. That's my reflection. And teachers are eager to grow. They're eager to be pushed, and they're eager to push their scholars to rigor. So definitely there were questions, and I think that the way we went about it strategically, having like, for example, once the announcement was made, I said, I'm going to have a sign-up sheet on my door. If you want to have one-on-one meetings, if you have any questions. And that was really, it was empowering even for me, because the way that teachers walked in and say, I have your back, like I want to grow. So definitely, of course, change management is always difficult. It has its challenges, but overall, I think that we've been intentional in how we are supporting and leading our staff. There are a few that had concerns, and we addressed them. But I think that it's going well. And I think it's because it wasn't like, we're not fixing everything overnight, right? There are great things happening, and we need to push so we need a gradual release. And the message that we gave staff was like, we are working together. I always say that I can't do this by myself. So I think it really helped when the moment that I was like an hour, like I gotta make sure that my message is like good here. So definitely like talking to staff and letting them know, like, we are a team. We are LEEP Familia, and we're gonna do this together, and we're doing this for our kids, was powerful.
I mean, you started with a couple of afternoon all-staff meetings, which, gradually introduced the themes. The theme here is, forgive the pun, but making the leap to excellence. And so it's not about saying that we haven't accomplished a lot at this school, but we want to get where we're going even faster. And that's, I think, has been well received for the most part.
I would also add that we gave them a timeline. So like, once the change was announced, then we said, we gave them a heads up, like, this is what's happening in the next month. So they knew they had that information to then come and ask, questions. So that helped too.
Kudos, that's great.
Yeah, I think that sounds like very exciting. And so do you have another like all-day PD coming up, or not for a while? Or not?
The next all-day PD is the day we come back from winter break.
Oh, great.
So that's good. I was looking at the calendar 2 days ago, and I was like, yes, that's perfect timing. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, it's also just about making the most of the afternoon time and the Wednesday time. And the team's been reevaluating how we spend those minutes. Most productive. We covered all this. The only other thing I was going to mention was the step among the adjustments to the way we use our step assessment is a faster administration. So whereas step rounds had been stretching out over up to 4 weeks, it's now going to be both languages in 2 weeks. So putting everybody you can, setting very smart schedules. I didn't think it was possible, but the schedules are there and it's happening as of this week. So hopefully that will not only get us information faster, but will allow teachers to be, reducing the amount of the year that's spent on that instead of instruction, which is, I think is really great. COVID safety is our next topic. We continue to have weekly testing on Thursdays of students who have opted in for the random testing. We also, this month got the news that, of course, there is now a vaccine available for students who are age 5 and up. We've shared information with our families about opportunities there. We've also put in a request to have LEEP serve as a pop-up site for student vaccination. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to share details. The New York City DOE is arranging those, but we hope to be able to share that opportunity. The good news is, though, it's not dependent on us. There's a vaccine bus parked nearby in Sunset Park. There's a lot of local opportunities. So we're just going to continue to let parents have that information so that they can make that decision. And then we did have our first positive case in the building, so I can no longer say we haven't had any this year. But as usual, we follow the protocols. In this case, there was no quarantine required beyond the one particular student. And so we're staying vigilant. We're isolating kids who have symptoms. We're sending kids home. We're doing our temperature checks. And we're, hoping that as the weather gets colder, we'll still be able to avoid any closures.
For any student that's tested positive, are you offering a Zoom learning environment or is it just stay home? No Zoom option.
Speak to that.
Yes, so this is our first case, as Michael mentioned. So we are launching our Zoom, like having them go on Zoom. Unfortunately, this student has not been well enough. So he signed on once, but he wasn't feeling well and feeling up to it. We are checking in with him tomorrow again to see how he's feeling, but definitely we have the technology and we have, we're able to set it up in the class. But this was the first time that we were going to see how it went and then debrief and then, have a clear plan for any future cases. But it hasn't been like really possible to do it because he hasn't been up to it.
In principle, this would be a selection of the day, not the entire day, but key moments when you're Zooming and then otherwise doing asynchronous work.
What percentage of kids have opted in for testing? I feel like you've shared this with us before.
I know we shared it after the first week. Do you have that information, Matthew?
I don't know the exact percentage. I would say probably about 30%.
I shaved my beard off. Nobody noticed all day. I took a sip of my coffee in a meeting with Matthew and he said, "Oh."
Well, one day we'll have enough perspective to know if it looks good. But I know we talked about this testing thing last month and probably before, but what's the DOE's position on the fact that you're randomly testing 30% of the students? I mean, I know I asked last time what happens if all of them opted out. And we didn't know what would happen, right? But luckily they haven't, but it's like there are 70% of the students who are not testing. And so that means if you're randomly testing 30%, at some point you're going to start testing them again, right? Just by sheer number.
That's right.
So, like, have we asked what we hope to accomplish with this ridiculous system? And not because I don't think we should be testing or that we should know. It's just like the way this is laid out is not telling us anything useful. It's like you're taking a random percentage of 30%. Your best possible notion of knowledge is still so slim.
Well, it's 20%. You have to test 20% of the school community?
10.
10?
So you're taking a third of those students every time? So you've probably already tested them twice.
Correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's like these parents are not saying whatever the hell you're doing, whatever you're doing to my kid.
Testing?
It's not.
No, well, I don't know what it is. Like my kid just had a COVID test and it didn't seem so bad, but like, I'm just saying. Like, my kid, these 30% of the kids are doing all the testing while the other ones aren't. I mean, I don't personally have a problem if it were my child, but I know parents, they're crazy. Right? Like
We are.
we are all, yes, in our own unique ways.
Yeah.
And so like, coming up with, why are you doing this to my kid, doesn't seem so foreign. That's all.
Well, I think, there are a lot of things that.
I'm doing this for the DOE, not for you, but like. I wanna
No, I know,
Right?
I
Like-
know.
Yeah.
It is.
Because my son's school, he's in middle school, public school, and they're not testing kids. They just test on their own. And if they're positive, they just let the teachers know.
Hmm.
That's it.
They test on their own outside of the
Yes,
school.
outside of the school.
Yeah, we haven't been given
So
that
that's
option.
why
I'm unaware
I'm
of.
not sure.
Yeah,
Maybe the middle school, I don't know.
I know my child's middle school is definitely testing on site as well.
Yeah.
I will say, in the spirit of trying to think about what we can control, I think it is a good reminder that we can, even as we're sharing the vaccine information, we can also remind parents
Yeah.
to opt in to the test to help us keep us safe, keep us open, as we say.
First of all, it exposes fewer kids to the test. The more people who opt in, the fewer kids who actually get tested, right? And it actually keeps the kids safer. So like, it benefits everybody in so many ways. That's like, it seems.
And for any of our parents who might be on the line or watching later, just as a reminder, this is no longer an invasive test. This is a very shallow swab. It's not painful. Kids don't cry, and it's extremely fast. So they're
Kids
gonna-
like-
My
They do it in, like,
3-year-old,
20
3-year-old
seconds.
had one this weekend. It was totally.
yeah.
Yeah, my daughter was giggling. She thought it was.
Yeah. Very, very good.
That's a good idea. Pair it with
I have-
vaccine.
I have a quick question. Have we been getting the results from the testing?
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. Good to know.
Yeah, so through the actual testing program, we've received no positive results.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
that has been, that has.
Other
been
people self-reported then.
Great.
Correct.
I'm just checking since my kid got tested, but I never got the results. And I actually went through the website and emailed people. And, I'm assuming that if it had been a positive, we would have heard. And I wasn't following up on it based on any concerns for a positive case, but I just wanted to make sure that the results were being provided. And I don't know if it was the matter of like matching me with her that didn't, but it just got lost in the system, and I ended up not hearing back. Just not LEEP, but the company.
Correct, yeah, so we do not directly provide the results to families. The BioReference, which is our partner that we work with, they provide results for positive cases directly to the families, and then they provide all the results to the school.
Okay, so Mala, did you hear that?
And that's how most testing companies are doing this. They only communicate with the family if it's positive, and they go straight to the family.
That's good to know. The email had been confusing, and I thought we would be getting the result regardless.
So that's a
Thank
third
you.
point. Yeah. Thank you, Maha. There are no more questions. We have one other item of new business. This was in the pre-reads. I had a chance to speak with our SED liaison yesterday about the specifics here. So just to set the stage, as you know, we are governed by a charter that describes our program. And there's never been a charter school that just executed on what they originally thought. It's a lot of content, and you encounter the real world or new tools become available, and so you make adjustments, small and sometimes large. The smaller adjustments are known as non-material revisions. Essentially, in our case, that means that the Board of Regents doesn't have to vote on that. Like if we were to become a French immersion school, that would be a very material revision. Thank you. But we instead, we do know that there's a best practice of not ignoring the ways in which your program evolves or different approaches that you've piloted over the years, and leaving all that until your renewal. The state doesn't like to hear, oh yeah, there's a long list of things that we changed. So instead, what we are always advised to do is to share those and to make them official through the state's official process. And so there were a few that jumped out to us that we shared an overview, and then actually the red line edit was in your pre-reads to see the areas of the charter that we would change. But just to summarize, our whole one of our core beliefs is that knowledge matters. One of the big elements of our program design is having a content-rich curriculum. So kids are acquiring content knowledge from a cross-cultural perspective. And then part of that was using a curriculum called Core Knowledge Language Arts. You may recall in our first year, we felt like in practice, there were some limitations to that. For example, not enough writing practice for students and some other kinds of instructional drawbacks. And so we began piloting another curriculum, which is very similar, but in a sense more modernized, Wit and Wisdom, which is another content-rich curriculum for English language arts and social studies. And so in some grade levels, we've been using CKLA, and in others, we're using Wit and Wisdom. We'd like the state to be aware of that because there's a lot of mentions of core knowledge, but it's really just another version of the same thing. A second item is we got a question from our authorizer last year about science instruction. We also heard some feedback from teachers and from parents about, are we having enough science? And so as you all know, we have 2 full-time science teachers this year who are teaching science as a special subject. But our charter had also talked about homeroom teachers doing science and math sort of integrated together. And the way our master schedule looks now, we're not doing that. Instead, we have this dedicated science that can be planned. So I'm not saying there are no connections made to math or math never gets used. But if the authorizer shows up and says, show me that integrated science and math you talked about, I'd like to be able to explain how our thinking has evolved. And then finally, as you may recall, originally we were going to not use the STEP, we were going to use the DRA EDL tool for English and Spanish formative assessment. And we have found the STEP to be much more granular, much more actionable. And with the STEP Espanol, which wasn't available when we wrote the charter, we have that same format in both languages for our teachers. So again, these are all things, I think perhaps with the exception of the science item, these are all things we've talked about as a board pretty extensively. But what I would ask is if there's any discussion, let's talk about it. And then it would be helpful to have a resolution to approve these, and then we'll submit those to the state. So any questions or thoughts? Pretty straightforward.
I'll say, like, I certainly reviewed these, and one, I think, like, even the Wit and Wisdom curriculum is part of Great Minds, which also does Eureka and a number of other, like, pretty well respected. It's a solid curriculum, so I think that's a nice add-in. And STEP is certainly, like, very well used and respected across a whole host of schools, and the fact that it has STEP SNO is wonderful. I think these are both thoughtful changes that have already been piloted, so absolutely we should include the revisions so that the state has that in writing. But if there's any like questions or comments about these specific ones.
I mean, I don't want to get too involved in this, and I know that you've had extensive discussions with the academic committee. I just want whoever may be listening, a few of those people, to understand, some of these details. I think that the STEP not being available in Spanish was a big distinction from when we started working on understanding how the students were doing, and making sure that we were tracking that growth in both English and Spanish led us away from the STEP system. But being able to do it in concert in English and Spanish makes a lot of sense, especially since STEP is so good in English and was so good in English. It has been showing to be in Spanish as well. The one that I don't know as much about, though, is the separation of science and math. And as a math person who is not terribly scientific all the time, I think that conceptually makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm not sure that it makes sense to people whose children may be exposed to this change. So If there's something you could just gloss over with that to tell us why that makes more sense, I think that'd be helpful. But as to number one, I think.
Yeah, well, I think number two is really pretty much a pragmatic judgment. We had struggled to implement it within our schedule. And so it was something that we were supposed to be doing that didn't always get the instructional minutes that it really deserved. So we regrouped this year as we had grown our staff. We turned science into a special subject. And so.
And there's a science-specific staff person, as I recall.
Correct. We have two full-time science teachers. They're pushing into every classroom. When they're teaching, it's all science, and their time is within the weekly schedule. So the homeroom teacher can't sort of let science shrink away to provide some more time for something else.
Okay.
So,
great.
yeah, so this is really just trying to make more dedicated time for science. I know our teachers like to make cross-curricular connections, so I'm not saying that that's reduced in any way, but this is kind of how the schedule shows it now.
If any other thoughts, we can take a motion to approve the proposed charter revisions.
So moved.
And a second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. So next up would be the committee reports. I believe we have, in addition to our finance committee, the entire finance committee here tonight. We also have Bob Keogh, our friend, on the line. I don't know who'd like to present.
I'm gonna ask Bob to do that, but if it's not too forward, can I ask that in the future you add the family relations committee here so we can hear from David and Mal, whatever else they've made in that regard?
Yes, I
And
confess.
for today, it's not an issue, but in the future meetings, I think, there, and I apologize, Emily, for.
No, don't apologize.
I mean, do we need to establish a formal committee, vote on the committee or something, or how does it work to establish a new committee?
So.
I thought we had already done, have we not done that last month?
You talked about it, but we didn't like, we said maybe David would be
There
on
was
it.
not an official motion. The board's free to establish an ad hoc committee at any point. You can, to amend the bylaws to make it an official committee would be something else that we could do. There's certainly nothing to stop us from having a standing report from any committee of the board, whether it's official or ad hoc.
I mean, at this point, my feeling would be that it would be ad hoc, we see what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we, so we don't need a motion to convene an ad hoc committee. An ad hoc, I imagine, is not the technical term, or is it?
It is.
It is,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah.
And then we can consider making it permanent.
Yeah. And what is the name of the committee's
Families
going
of
by?
age.
I don't know, David's first job is to name the committee. So you can pick it up.
Very
I
good.
told him that last month, so he should be well on his way.
Okay,
Family.
so I'll make sure that's added for next time.
But with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Bob to run us through the finance committee report, which I hope has been amended since last night to reflect our non-capitalized lease as well as our capitalized lease. But if not, I'll get into that. Bob, you with us?
I am, thank you. So by way of fiscal year 22 financials, not a lot of material change from last month. In the financials that were circulated by Michael, you would see a year-to-date surplus of $68,000 against a forecasted annual surplus of a little more than $300,000. That number is a little bit below our budgeted surplus directly related to enrollment. However, this is one of those in-between months where we don't report per pupil to the Department of Education. So these numbers are built around an enrollment of 311. Going back to what Michael said earlier, we were able to pick up an additional 5 students, which will yield the school an additional $90,000. So we should be, that'll project to a surplus of about $400,000 for the year.
On the balance sheet side, we ended the year, the month with almost $1.1 million in cash. So a strong position there against $280,000 in accounts receivable, which are funds due to us from the Department of Education. And then just going back to our fiscal year 21 audit, the Finance Committee did receive the audit. It was an unmodified opinion, which is the strongest opinion you can get from an auditor. That means no findings, very clean. And you know, David, I did not update the graphs to. I sent you an email separately what our ratios would be, but I did not recirculate it to this board. We had a unique situation where we were forced to capitalize our facility lease on the audit, which really skews our assets and liabilities. And we will be one of the only charter schools this fiscal year that are presenting financials in such a manner to the state education department. But with absent of that and some of the like non-cash adjusting entry changes that were related to that, we ended last year with about $400,000 in net income, which is very strong for a school in its second year.
Right, so just to kind of lay that down in more layman's terms, it's an off month, so we didn't get to report our new 5 students, so we are still showing the same lower adjusted income that we showed last month. That will be corrected in future months when we do get to report that, to the tune of sounded like 90,000, which would bring us very close to getting back in line with a 400 and 600, so something that looks a lot more acceptable bottom line. And when it came to the audit, the auditors presented our audit to us on October 30th, and it needed to be submitted on November 1st. So even though I argued with them about whether or not this lease capitalization needed to be done, there was not much time to change it. Ultimately, their opinion was that it had to be done at some point in the next several fiscal years, I think 3 or 4, but they felt it should be done as soon as possible, so they did it. Capitalizing the lease itself should be a non-event. Unfortunately, there is a lot of depreciation and other non-cash balance sheet impacts that you have to take on, especially when you're early in the lease like we are, because the impact of that depreciation hits up front when you've done so much of that. So what that did was basically throw our debt to asset ratio out of compliance when it had otherwise been perfectly good by virtue of us having done absolutely nothing. So what I asked Bob to do was make sure that he keeps track of that fact, that had our balance sheet not been adjusted in this non-cash, non-eventful way by our accountants after the fact, we would have been perfectly well in compliance with the asset ratio. And as I said to the Finance Committee last night, it's a shame that I couldn't get to the auditors earlier to fix this, because I don't want this to be a thing that the DOE looks at when it's truly a non-issue. Why is there going to be a flag out there that isn't really real? But nonetheless, it's out there. We won't be the only school. Within the next 3 fiscal cycles, it sounds like all charter schools will have to do this, regardless of where their funding comes from. And I'm hopeful the DOE understands that, but the government is not always the swiftest to follow their own practices, so I remain hopeful. But if anyone has questions about that, I'm sure Bob can explain that as well, or if you'd like to ask me, I'm here.
Can I ask what is the purpose? I know I'm not as versed in this as you are, or anyone else is. Like, what's the purpose?
There are as far as we're a nonprofit, so we have no tax liability. The purpose of capitalizing a lease is to recognize kind of accelerated depreciation and therefore decreasing like an organization's tax liability. In accounting, in like the public accounting space, there are like the big 4 firms. BDO is probably number 5. Their charter school practice. They actually bought our previous auditing firm, so we kind of got covered by this very large auditing company. No other charter schools that we work with this year were like obligated to capitalize their operating leases. So this is honestly, we knew this was coming 2 years down the road, but BDO really pressed for this this year. They work with 2 charter schools, us, who is a single site in its 3rd year, and they audit Success Academies, who is the largest operator in the city and has a lot of money in assets. So they're part of, we press them on this. They kind of push back, and this is kind of where we landed.
Thank you.
And I mean, we should just remain, like I said, we should remain hopeful that the DOE understands that this is all after the fact reallocation of the same exact cash and assets that were there before. And I can only say that I hope that they get that, as they're not financial people. But like, nothing has changed. We didn't do anything differently. It's just the way that that ratio is reported. And it's because we don't get any benefit of that accelerated depreciation because we don't pay taxes, right? So from my perspective, there was no reason to do this. From their perspective, it was like, well, you have to do it eventually. Getting in front of it is better for, IRS purposes. Frankly, I don't think we're an IRS concern. But again.
And in January as well, I think we will have an ample opportunity to provide and like justification or write-ups back to the SED, as that's typically when we receive kind of our annual report back from them. So a component of that report is obviously your annual financials from the previous year. So we will be sure to have everything documented and ready to go by then.
Thank you, Bob.
And of course, the upshot to remember is there are more students, the revenue number will grow, and that's all positive stuff. And so even though I'm upset about the audit, the bulk of this report is positive. But I think that's it from us.
Great.
Any report from the executive committee?
Nope.
I think that we may want to discuss some real estate issues in the executive session, if people have time, but it's not, I don't think it's for the board.
No, we'll do anything good. That's perfect. For education and accountability, Maho attended. Maho, I don't know if you're still on and can share any notes.
I'm on. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to share. I don't have all the information from the committee. I was assuming it would be shared by Johanna or Michael, or Roberto, who were also there. It was a good meeting. I was there, and so were the 3 of them, and we discussed a lot of what was discussed previously today. The changes to the charter, sorry, yes, I thank you. Yes, all these changes. This was pretty much everything discussed in the meeting. There were a couple of things where we just went a little bit more deeply, but it's basically everything that's been shared today. There was one thing that we just made more clear in the meeting that was mentioned quickly here in terms of the change in the language for talking about rigor. And it was just digging a little more deeply into what Michael was saying. It does not mean that we're about to turn into a disciplinary school or anything like that. All the things that drew so many parents here, the cariño and the social emotional development, that is still included in the responsive classroom. So it's still there. It's just rigor does not mean that. That was the one thing that, we went a little bit more in depth, but no, it was great to get a little bit more detail on the classrooms and the teaching and the changes made to the planning. And that was pretty much it. It's all been covered earlier with the updates that Johanna and Michael gave.
Thank you.
Great.
I know we discussed the ad hoc committee, so we'll check in with David. I don't believe we have any other updates related to board norms and development. So with that, our next item would be public comments. As usual, we invite anyone attending tonight to take up to 3 minutes if you wish, and to share any comments that you may have. And also, as usual, I'm going to just go in the order of Zoom, which I think is just simply alphabetical order. Ms. Woods, would you care to share a comment this evening?
No, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you. No comment.
Thank you. See you at the school. Ms. Rosato Bunkley, would you care to speak tonight?
No comment today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farber, would you care to share tonight?
Yes, of course. I just have a few quick things. I wanted to say my son loves having science, so thank you for that. I also wanted to give a shout out to the vaccine bus in Sunset Park on 53rd Street, and I want to explain, express my appreciation for all you're doing to try to get the kids vaccinated and educate parents. I was wondering if there's anything being done to get more kiddos in that testing pool. So if anybody wants to speak on that. And then I just wanted to just know, I do appreciate all the communication that we get from the school. My son's teacher, who was listed as a substitute on the website, but it was never really communicated that, or it may have been, but it wasn't obvious to me that she was not going to be the permanent teacher. It was sort of, I felt like it was kind of sprung on me that she was removed from the classroom and became sort of a floating teacher. And perhaps this was expressed, but it was just kind of surprising, and it was late in the school year, so I was just surprised. So to the extent that parents can be kind of kept apprised of these things like this, I think I know many of us in the school class would probably appreciate that. So that's
Thank
it.
you for that. Yeah. Thank you, Lauren, for that feedback.
Yeah, no
That
problem.
point is- I know we take seriously. I don't expect that to happen very often, but we do know that shifts during the year are a reality most school years, and so we will take that under consideration, kind of debrief on that to look to the future. In terms of communicating to families about getting into the test pool, I think that was something that we've sort of recognized here in the room tonight, is that we'll do another push for communication tied to that push around the vaccination opportunities.
Okay, sorry if I missed that. I apologize.
No, quite all right. So.
Oh, no, it was on my mind also. So we had tried to raise it earlier, but yes, I think it's a valid comment that we should be expanding the pool as much as we can.
Very good. All right. Ms. Huela, Senora Huela, do you care to make a comment?
Yes, hi, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yeah, do you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm very happy. This is the first, and I'm sorry. I want to email my, I want to put somebody for my husband also, because I can't, sometimes I'm at work, I cannot, listen. I could listen, but I cannot answer the question or ask the something. So I email already, but I don't know, nobody respond to the email. So I don't know what could I do it. And also the Parents Square is not working so good in my phone.
Maybe we can put her in contact with someone from the operations team to,
Yeah. So we
we
will,
have her contact.
we will make
info?
sure you get a phone call tomorrow and we can help you with both of those items.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And I don't know, did you say your husband was there with you now?
He told me he already put the email, but nobody accepted him.
Uh-huh.
And just to make sure we can follow up. Well, you know what? We have your information. So we'll give you a call and we'll find out exactly where the email went and we'll follow up. So
Thank
look
you.
for a call from us
I'm very
tomorrow.
sorry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, those are all of our attendees right now. So I believe that concludes our public comment. The open meetings law provides a certain set of reasons why we can go into executive session, and one of those is to discuss pending real estate business. So if there's a motion to do so, we can move into executive session, and then Maho, we'll share another link with you.
So
And a second.
second,
And all in favor?
aye.
Great.
Okay. So the way this will work is the board is going to go into executive session. And they, I believe, expect to only return to adjourn the meeting. But we will leave this line open and the recording will continue. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Zoom on the recording. Okay.
You're muted, Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. Motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
We adjourn.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good night.
you.